All Things Montessori community. Happy Tuesday. Another week is here and it's August. I can't believe it's August already. That's just sort of, it seems really crazy. But time seems to be passing quickly in all sorts of ways. And it's almost the beginning of the school year again. And speaking of the school year, I have another installment of the teacher series. I'm so pleased today to talk with my colleague and friend, Becky. She is so wonderful. She runs an all-day, all-year program at Fiore Montessori School where I used to teach at. She is fantastic. We talk all about doing primary all year, all day. We really get into practical life, and we touch on math and how teaching children in the Montessori method boosts confidence and really fosters their independence with all sorts of learning. So I really hope you enjoy. This episode is brought to you by Patreon. We would not be able to do anything without our patrons. So thank you everyone who's become a patron. I want to welcome a new patron to our ranks. Welcome, Jen. Thank you so much for becoming a patron of All Things Montessori. If you're interested in becoming a patron of All Things Montessori, you can follow the link below or head on over to patreon.com. You can search for All Things Montessori and you can find what donation works for you. And again, this is totally voluntary. I really appreciate any support you can give, whether it's through Patreon or just through your love and support and listenership. So thank you so much. And this episode is brought to you by Sapling Supply. If you haven't listened to my Sapling Supply episode with Paul and Joe, please do. It's so fun. They are such a delight to talk to. And you can head on over to Sapling Supply to get beautiful handmade Montessori furniture that comes pre-assembled. If you're looking to get any furniture for your classroom or anything at all, head on over there and you can use our promo code ATM10 to get 10% off anything site-wide. Without further ado, please enjoy this awesome episode with Becky in our next installment of the teacher series. I'm so delighted today to have one of my teacher friends and colleagues here with me today to talk all things Montessori and all things about being a Montessori teacher. I have Becky Myers-Pollock with me. She's a primary guide and we worked together for 4 years. I guess. Man, sounds like a long time. Welcome, Becky. I'm so happy you're here.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. I am obsessed with podcasts, so it's cool to be on the other side.
Yes, I'm also obsessed with podcasts, which is probably why I have my own podcast. Oh my gosh. Well, what I ask everybody when they come on the podcast is something that I think Montessorians always talk about. You know, I'm sure you've been at conferences or meetings or anything where everybody's talking about how they came to Montessori or their Montessori story. So what is your Montessori story, Becky?
Yeah, well, I did my undergrad in elementary and early childhood education. And I had some really cool early childhood professors that were kind of really into different alternative philosophies and whatnot. And the one professor had her children in a local Montessori school. And so for one of our assignments, you had the option of doing an observation at that school. And I was like, oh yeah, I'll check that out. Why not? And the whole time I had been in my undergrad, I sort of had this there's something about schools or education or teaching that doesn't quite feel right to me, is a little bit off. And I could never put a finger on it. And I remember walking into that school and being like, oh, they figured it out. Whatever it was that I was not liking, they fixed it. And so it was sort of just in my head, I ended up babysitting for the teacher that I observed and sort of keeping in touch with her. And it was just sort of confusing to figure out the training and AMI versus AMS and all of that. So it sort of took me a couple years. But a friend of mine was doing her master's at Loyola, a different program. But I think she had mentioned oh, I saw something about Montessori, a Montessori program there. And I went on the website and saw WMI's program. And I don't really know what came over me, but all of a sudden I was just yep, I'm going to move and I'm going to do it. And here we go. And so that was sort of, I just took off from there.
Oh my gosh. So did you work in a public school setting before you did this, or?
Yeah, so I did not. I worked in like a before and after school program.
Okay.
I did something called, I'm from Pennsylvania, and they call it TSSing. I think it has different names in different areas, but essentially like one-on-one support with children with like ADHD or
Hmm.
maybe autism or some of those things where they might need extra support. So I did that for a couple of years. And
I
then,
see. Okay. And then you had the epiphany and moved. I did that too. I literally like had a feeling and then I was like, I'm going to go and I'm going to go do this. And then I just like moved and did it. So I
yeah,
totally feel you.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, and it's funny. I think now I feel a little bit more spontaneous in life, but at the time that was very much like, whoa, like why did I, like a fate thing of like this is just right. And
Totally.
um,
And, I think, I don't know about you, but I remember now looking back at it, I'm like, oh, I'm really glad that worked out because it was a big risk to do that. But the
yeah,
minute I got to WMI, I knew I was in the right place.
yeah. I mean, I loved that year. Like I look back on that like so fondly, and
Me too.
um, yeah, it was a great experience.
Me too. So after going through training, did you immediately start working?
Yeah. I got a job at Fiore, same school that you came to the next year.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I started there right away. I was in the same classroom that I'm in now, but I had like a different role. It's an all day, all year classroom. And at the time, they had sort of set it up where it was two guides, and one that was the idea was that they had a little bit more experience, and then the other one, me, was newer. And so I sort of had an interesting role. I can't say that I loved the situation when I first started. It was kind of like I came in a little bit later. I would work on like materials or things like that, or observe in the mornings, and then kind of take over like the later part of the day. And I think it was nice. I can be a little bit timid sometimes to start. So I think in that sense, it was a good experience that I didn't kind of just have to be thrown into everything that's involved in running a classroom.
Yeah.
But I think I maybe stayed in that role a little bit too long,
Mm-hmm.
where it
Mm-hmm.
kind of just became a little bit like, okay, I'm ready
Yeah.
for the next thing. I want to have a little bit, I want this to be like my thing. And I know in training, they talk a lot about, or like with AMI, they talk a lot about how it should be like one guide, right, in the
Mm-hmm.
classroom, and having that like ownership and control, and the ability to like experiment and try
Mm-hmm.
things. And so after, I'm trying to remember if it was 2 years that I did that, I ended up moving. The other teacher that was with me left the school, and I ended up kind of merging classes with the owner of the school, and the two of us worked together for a year in the classroom. But in that scenario, we sort of shared the same role. We kind of just went back and forth a little bit, which was interesting. It was better. And then starting 2 years ago now, it's just been me as the guide, and then I have two assistants
That's
that kind
right.
of split the day. Mhm.
Yeah. So let's talk about all year, all day, because I think what a lot of schools have gone through is what you just described, kind
Mhm.
of trying out different ways, because inevitably it is so much work for everybody. It's constant, care. It's all the time. And then not to mention it's all day. So there's breaks to think about, if you're working during the summer, how are you getting that, time to reset?
Right.
And what keeps you in that role? Do you find that it's different than, a traditional just school year role? I just want to pick your brain about it a little bit.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like I have not figured it out. I look at, there's, a few like awesome Montessorians that have these all day, all year classrooms that have been up and running for, years and years. And
Yeah.
they've really like seem to have nailed it. And it's these like, beautiful setups and the teachers all, kind of have these breaks and they feel refreshed and whatnot. And I don't know that we're there yet. It's challenging. I think it's wonderful that we're able to offer it. I think it's so like necessary in our society and our culture right now. Usually both parents work, or there's only one parent, or whatever it might be. And it's, I think, awesome that we have the opportunity to keep children in this kind of environment for that full span of when they're not able to be at home. So I think it's great, but it's hard. It's challenging. Like you said, it's kind of like it's all day and you have to be, teaching. And I think especially as a Montessori guide, like it's just all of you all the time,
all the
right?
time.
It's
Sure.
your emotional well-being and like energy, mentally, physically, like all of it has to sort of be on all the time. And so I think it's important to figure out ways to schedule in those times away and whatnot. I know this is kind of veering off of what you asked me, but interestingly, COVID was sort of the first time I was away from my classroom and my school for more than like a week or two.
Sure.
And I never, had the experience of like having that time away and how necessary that is. And I think like I had all these ideas and I felt so much more energized coming out of COVID, which I think is strange. Most people sort of had this opposite experience. But for me, it was like, even though we were doing some stuff online with the children, it was so different and so removed, so much less, right? In the end. And so I kind of, that was, like I said, the first time I kind of had the experience of getting some time off and away to some extent. And the head of my school is great. She ended up, making some changes to the school, the way the summer is going to run, so that I would be able to have some time off. So this year, I have the month of June off, which has been awesome and exciting. And so I think I think that whole component of an all day, all year setup is so important. Like making sure that if you are the guide in that classroom, you're taking time away, or you're taking time for yourself, or you're sort of building those ways to be able to replenish yourself.
Yeah, it's so true because, even in the regular school year, like we hit those months. Like I always felt like the month of March was just like this never ending, like, I don't even know. It just, there's like no breaks and it doesn't end and it's awful.
Right.
So we all have those things throughout the year. And it's so important to take those steps back. And I love what you say about becoming re-inspired and refreshed, because it's like not only for you, it's for the work we're doing that we take these breaks, because then you can have the time to be like, yes, here are those 10 lessons that I've been really excited about, but I haven't had a moment to make that material or create that. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. And that was like the biggest, like the way that I felt towards the children, or like how I felt I was interacting with them this past year was like so different. I mean, maybe not noticeably different to anybody else, but like the way that it felt inside was like so much better, because I was just able to come at it with a more like clear mind and, let go of some of the like stresses and things that build, and I now I'm also, I think, more in tune with when that's happening. Like I felt it a little bit, like you said, like maybe towards the end of the year or right before like the winter break, I could feel this shift in how I felt about things and how much energy I was able to put into the classroom. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah,
that's good, because we have this time coming up and, I just need to make it till then. And then I'll be, able to be a better teacher at the end of that.
So I was going to ask you, so when you have an all day program, as Montessorians, we have our work cycles. So is it that there's just another work cycle after the afternoon work cycle?
We've played around with slightly different ways of doing it this past year. What we did was most of the year, at least in Virginia, it's pretty nice. Like the weather is pretty nice the second half of the day. So we would spend the after like the 3:00 dismissal, the children would have like a snack together, and then they would go out into the garden, the backyard of the school, and
nice.
spend time outside, which I think is awesome. And I think that that's so
great.
necessary.
Yeah.
And, the school that I'm at has a beautiful,
it does. It's like a park.
Yeah.
It's
yeah. So being able to take advantage of that, I think is great. And children get like less and less of that, or at least it seems. People always, talk about like right now it's, they're on screens or whatnot. So I think the more time out in nature, when we had the cicadas, they were loving that. They would find like collections of them. It was
gross. I'm sorry. Like, I love that they're not afraid of them, like me, who is truly traumatized, but that's disgusting.
Yeah. And we have, my classroom has a little patio garden that comes off of it. And, we plant vegetables and fruits. We have strawberries and tomatoes and cucumbers and different types of flowers out there. So the children are also kind of tending to those. When it gets a little bit colder in the winter months, we might not be out there, or we might not be out for as long. And then it's kind of a relaxed, maybe you call it a work cycle. I am not usually there at that very end of the day part. So, there's not like lessons happening. They do a lot of help with like upkeep of the classroom, like resetting for the next day, which I think is also a great opportunity, kind of take that ownership and a little more opportunity to feel like it's their space. Like they'll help empty the dishwasher or do the laundry or, reset materials, things like that. This year with COVID was a little bit different because there were some, protocols we put into place and whatnot where they might not be able to be as hands-on involved with some of that. But there were, new ways for them to help. Could they sanitize materials and, those kinds of things.
Yeah. And your classroom in particular, it's so gorgeous. I've always loved it. But it's, it looks like a home down there, and I think a lot of Montessori classrooms have that feel to them, but yours in particular, it's got all these like lovely hallways, which I know the children probably hide in, but they're
love-hate. Right. I have a love-hate with those.
Totally. Yes. But there's beautiful dimensions. You have the back patio, you have a kitchen. It's very much like a sanctuary and a home. So I can see with, if you think about a young child being at school from 8:30 to almost, it could be 5:45, right?
Yeah. Some of them come at 7:45. So
that
it's like 7:45.
That's a long day.
5:45. It's a very long
That's a very long day. So to have a space that has so many different avenues, one for academic learning and all of that, but, to have a space to feel comfortable and safe and an outdoor area and the garden, and that is, I think that's amazing for those kids to have that, especially when they're not, they're away from home for so long.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And that's something that I try to always kind of keep at the forefront is like, even for myself, as an adult, you feel more comfortable, you feel more inspired, maybe even when you're in like a space that feels good, right? And that feels homey or feels, whatever it is that kind of makes you feel good. So I've, especially in the past couple of years when it's been, my classroom, I've tried to do what I can to kind of bring that feel to it. And I've always kind of been interested in, a little bit of like interior design. And
yes, I know you are.
So that's sort of a part of this work that I really enjoy is kind of putting things together and that sort of creative side to it.
It's gorgeous. Do you have a washing table like for clothes, or am I thinking of something else?
I'm not exactly sure what you mean by a table, but
or it's like a washing station thing. Like, don't you have something like that? What would that be called? Sorry.
And there's cloth washing. Yeah. And I think it's like I don't know that all classrooms have this, but I think it's something that's semi-common at least.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm blanking on where the school ordered them from, but we have, like a cloth washing station and a dishwashing station that are like a standalone.
That's right. So can you talk to me? It seems so random, but as an elementary person that walks into a primary classroom, I'm always just like, oh my God, what's that? And right. I feel like I know the basics, but then there's things like that really stand out to me. And I remember seeing that, and I never got the chance to ask you. I can assume that it's in the practical life, but at what age would you introduce that? Is that something you'd introduce to a young child? And what's the reasoning behind that?
Yeah. So it is practical life. And I mean, I would show that to like a 3-year-old. And the cool thing about practical life is, I mean, you're wanting them to continue to use those things like all through the span of primary in some way, shape, or form. So you can kind of, add new components, or you can call their attention to like the tiniest details to sort of keep that engagement as they get a little bit older, as their skills, grow. But so cloth washing, it's part of that whole idea of having them feel like they are a part of the community, that they can contribute, that they have like a role and a purpose. They can take care of the environment that they're sharing. There's, other components or different types of practical life where it's either care of self or care of environment. I don't know how much you want me to go into. I feel like you could talk about practical life like for days.
I'm so fascinated with practical life because it does transition into elementary, but in a different way, I would find that if I had 6 and 7-year-olds, I'd find them asking me if they could wash the tables or if they could dust the shelves. And I remember being like, what? But then also being like, yes, please, I would love it if you cleaned.
Yeah.
So I think those tendencies to care for the environment, contribute, just like you're saying. Right. It goes into classroom jobs in elementary. That's sort of how we assign, we're all part of a community, so we make our space clean together.
Right.
But I think that's such a human quality.
Yeah. Sorry to cut you off there. I think when a child enters primary and they're 3 and 4 even, the purpose of the practical life is skill building, right? So we're not really expecting that they're going to end up with something that's clean or something that's, beautiful and shiny if they're polishing or what have you. But it's just building the skill. There's a lot of, there's, pincer grip and all of these things that are preparation for writing, muscle building, all of those kinds of things, moving from left to right. So that's kind of, where the focus is. It's just building those skills and learning how to do those different works. And then as they get older and they've kind of already gained those skills, it truly becomes more like a job, right? You see a table is dirty. Oh, I'm going to clean it. You see that the, little brass statue is tarnished. You polish it. You want to make snack for a friend, you go prepare that. So it's sort of, we even see that towards the end of primary, that it just becomes more, some of them I think choose it as like a comforting thing, right? There's something like meditative. And that's another big component of practical life, is building concentration. And that comes from the idea that it's like, it's repetitive, it's soothing, all of these kinds of things that just sort of like pull you into a meditation. I know I do that when I'm cleaning my house.
Me too.
I find that so relaxing.
Same.
And so it's actually kind of cute that for me to hear you say that elementary children are like, can I do that? Because there's part of me that's like, oh, I wonder if that's like a comforting thing to them. Or
I definitely think so. And we would actually have sometimes about like once a month, we'd kind of have like a cleaning afternoon. Basically, when we were having a chaotic day, I would say, we're going to do some cleaning this afternoon, just to kind of get the group, I think cleaning together, it's like you're doing something together for the good of the environment that you're in. And it's kind of a bonding experience, weirdly. But, in the Montessori classroom, primary or elementary, like everybody kind of does their part.
Right.
You know, everyone's a part of the community. Everyone does the cleaning, does the work, does that, you know, for the good of the class.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a great lesson that we're showing young children.
Yeah, for sure.
You know?
Yeah. And I think I think young children are kind of like brushed aside with some of that stuff, like at home, right? Parents, I mean, even just in my educating the parents in my classroom, they'll be like, oh, they can, wait, what? You know, like they can do that, or they see it as, or it flips to the other side where it's almost made like a punishment or something, right? Like, oh, you made that spill, now go clean it up. And
Absolutely.
So I think it's so awesome that we're kind of able to give, they want to be like a grown up. They want to be like their mom, their dad, their brother, their sister, and get to, you know, take care of their world, right? And themselves. So, I think that's like one of my favorite parts of Montessori, I think, is, again, like that independence or that sort of confidence boost that children seem to get from being able to be like a contributing member of society.
Right, because there's ownership in, I can have this snack and then I know where to put it in the dishwasher, or I know how to wash this dish. It's sort of my favorite part of Montessori too, it's the tiniest details that make like all the difference in the world.
Yeah. Well, it's just so like the fact that Maria Montessori, you know, saw all of this and like created all of this is like mind blowing, because it's like, and you know, these young children in primary, like that sense of order is so huge, and that can, you know, comes into play with all this practical life too. Like, oh, if you know something feels off to me, I know how to fix it. All of these kinds of things that I think, again, just like most of society looks at young children and they're like, oh, they're being so annoying, or they're, you know, whatever it might be. But it's like, no, like that's an inner, you know, drive of theirs to have things in order and to be affected by that when it's off. And so, again, it's just like incredible that, you know, someone was able to kind of come up with all of this and design a whole teaching philosophy from it.
I know it. I love it. So what is your favorite primary like section or favorite primary either material or lesson? I'm so fascinated with primary because I haven't taken the training. So I'm like, just talk to me about it. What's your fave or one of your favorites?
So I'm actually going to, I mean, I think practical life can be the most fun to like create and to see in use, you know, kind of thing. Or like, as, you know, adults might look in and be like, "Whoa, that's so cool."
Yeah.
But I think that the math materials are, especially like the golden beads. I think that might be my favorite, which is weird to hear myself say because I have always hated math. I was not good at it in school. It gave me tons of anxiety. Like I just did not like it. And even still as an adult, like I would say like, yes, I'm not good at math. But I had moments in my primary training working with some of the math materials where that was the first moment that I understood, like truly like grasped what was happening in certain, you know, math situations. And I think, you know, I wish so much that I had that experience, like the Montessori experience with math. I think my whole mentality towards math would be so different. And I really enjoy giving the lesson with golden beads, or really, like I said, kind of any of the math, but particularly golden beads. I think it's so kind of fun. And I know in particular, I was actually just talking to another primary guide about the subtraction lesson. And there aren't that many times in primary where we're like encouraged within a lesson to be like silly.
Yes, especially in primary. I feel like primary is so reserved is not the right word, but I think you have to be careful because you're modeling everything for them.
Right. And I feel like I am kind of silly, like in outside of teaching and whatnot. Like I, you know, like to laugh and you know,
of course.
Not that you don't get to do that in primary, but anyway, that's like the one. It feels like a very different lesson compared to other ones because you actually are supposed to kind of like be silly and be funny, where you're like, oh, the teacher starts off with all of the beads on their tray and they're like, wow, like I have so many beautiful beads. And I see that you have like number cards, but where are your beads? You don't have any beads. And you kind of like do this whole thing. And sometimes they're looking at you like, well, wait, you told me not to get beads. There's this whole like moment of like, what's happening?
Oh, fun.
Or some of them will just start cracking up. Like it's just a really cute, like fun lesson. I usually end up kind of getting like a little bit of a crowd sometimes the first, time or two in a year that we do that lesson, because it's just like, wait, what's happening? Like, why is she being?
It's so fun.
Yeah, it's so fun. It's so cute. And again, it's just like, I think subtraction and division in particular, when I was in school, were like
very abstract.
I don't want to do that. I can't do that. And it's almost been like therapeutic to have like this pleasant experience with those operations now as an adult, because it's like, oh no, like this is fun, or this is, I understand what's happening in the concrete and whatnot. So yeah, I think that those are probably some of my favorites.
I love that. I had such a similar journey with math. I feel you. Yeah. I mean, I honestly had like, so there's a material. I mean, I guess, do you learn racks and tubes in your training?
Yes.
Okay. So that one in particular for me, I actually loved division. But I just had a crutch on my shoulder that I was just bad at math, bad at math.
Right.
And I never, like you're saying, like never really understood somebody can tell me that 5 times 2 is 10 and that's fine. But like that was just something I memorized. I just memorized all this stuff, but didn't really understand. I didn't really like get it. And then I will never forget doing racks and tubes and being like, oh, like just understanding like division at its core, what it is. Or like you're saying, I think subtraction is extremely abstract. I think subtraction might be the hardest operation, if I'm being honest, because division has other components with it. But when you're asking a child like, okay, what's 10 minus 7? It's like, I don't know, like thinking about that in your head, like, and I have seen the primary lesson with the subtraction, and you are being silly, and like, thank goodness you're being silly, because subtraction is really difficult. And if they have that positive memory and it's fun, that's so awesome.
Right. Yeah, no, I think it's really cool to see these, and they're so young too, right? I think that's something that is a huge difference with Montessori at this age, at least. And I think it also translates to elementary as well. But like, these are little children doing division, doing multiplication in the thousands, right? Like big numbers, like all of this stuff. And it's like nothing to them, right? Like in a good way. It's just, oh yeah, like, that's what I do. And oh yeah, 5,329 minus, well, I can do that. And I think that that's like so cool. Like, again, I wish that I had sort of had the opportunity to experience math like that and kind of feel that way about it.
I know, they have such confidence and they love it, like that fierce love of it, just by feeling like, yeah, I know how to do that. Right. Like, yeah, I know how to do that, because they have those materials if they need them. And then it's so fun to watch them like not need the materials anymore. And that confidence. Yeah. I'm so jealous of Montessori kids. Like every day I'm like, oh my gosh.
Same. I know. Like, can I go back to school? Like, can I be 3 again and just start this?
I know. I'll just start all over again. So before we wrap up, this has been so much fun to talk about everything, but I wanted to, it's been a tremendous almost 2 years for teachers. A year and a half. Yeah. It has been a very chaotic and tough time for teachers. So I just wanted to ask you, any words of wisdom to teachers out there right now in this climate.
Right. Well, I mean, I think just because of the timing of doing this interview, I'd say making sure that you take like time for yourself, right? I mean, whether your schedule allows you to have a summer break or, take vacation time. I know I was just always so bad at that. Like my school gave me weeks, that I could take off for vacation, and I just never did it. Like I either felt guilty or I, would just brush it off because I'm like, I don't want to deal with figuring out the scheduling for that and, you know, all those kinds of things. But I think it's so important. Like our job is a big deal, right? Like what we're, you know, giving these children, and it takes so much of us. And I think that it's like a beautiful thing that we do, but I think teachers often sort of overlook themselves sometimes in the process. So whether it's like finding things that you can do after school each day. I know I started like going for long walks with my dog when I would get home from school, and that, you know, makes such a big difference on just a day-to-day basis. Or, you know, taking time if you have the opportunity, because I think it just makes you a better teacher really in the end, like it needing that replenishment. But yeah, I think that would probably be.
I love it. Words of wisdom and so important. Yeah, self-care, taking a step back, taking that vacation. Because I know what you mean. It is hard. It's hard to be like, okay, how am I going to get coverage? What is it? I get that. I get being like, oh, it's too much to think about. But you're so right in, you know, it's so worth it for you and for your kids in your class.
Right. And I think it gives you inspiration. It's just, it'll give you so much that I think even if you have to step away, you know, even if your children are still there or whatnot, like was the scenario that I had. And even if you feel a little bit guilty about that, or you feel like, oh no, like I'm going to come back and it'll be a mess, or, you know, whatever you might think is going to happen. I think, you know, even if there is something negative about it, like it's just going to give you so much that you're then going to be able to give the children, and it'll make a big difference.
Well, thanks so much for being here, Becky. This was so fun.
Thank you for having me. I feel like we need to do another episode where we just like compare primary and elementary, because that's something that like I'm always like, oh, tell me more about like how this carries on.
That'd be so fun.
Yeah, we should do it. All right.
Oh, let's do it. I'm actually gonna write it down.